Are there healthy fats? And if so, what makes a fat healthy and what is an unhealthy fat? I posted a video on social media recently where I was talking about healthy fats, and one of the comments I got was, well, you need to tell us what is a healthy fat, because when you say healthy and fat in the same sentence, it sounds very contradictory. So this is a video where I'm going to break all that down for you. I'm going to tell you what is a healthy fat, what is an unhealthy fat. We're going to talk a little bit about saturated fats and animal fats, and then we'll just wrap it up at the end for you. All right. So fat is something that is necessary for health, and it has unfortunately been demonized over the years because there was a feeling that fat is what contributed to weight gain, what made people fat, and fat also clogged the arteries. But we now know that that is absolutely not the case. Unfortunately, even though we know better now, there's still a lot of you who are trapped in the old beliefs and literally afraid of having any foods that contain fat, and you should not be afraid of these foods, and I'm going to explain to you why not. So what makes a fat healthy? Well, a healthy fat is a fatty, well, we should say first of all that fat is one of the necessary macronutrients. We have three main macronutrients. We have fat, we have protein, we have carbohydrates. Now we have essential fatty acids, which means that we cannot live without fat. We have essential amino acids, which means we can't live without protein. But as I've said before, there are no essential sugars. We can make our own glucose from scratch, so we don't necessarily need to have carbohydrates. But anyway, fat is one of the three main macronutrients that comprise a well-balanced diet. Now, in terms of what makes a healthy fat, I like to think of healthy versus unhealthy fat as the difference between something that you could potentially create in your kitchen, or fat that you would have in your kitchen, versus a fat that can only be made in the factory. And this kind of comes back to my Beam food pyramid that I've spoken about before, where we rank. It's a food ranking system to help you determine what makes a food healthy and what is an unhealthy food. And in this food ranking system, which is a 3-level system, at the base are the foods that come straight from nature, from the land and the sea. And then the middle tier, or the second tier, those are transformed foods. So the base foods, the tier 1 foods from the land and the sea, that are transformed to make them more useful, to enable preservation, to enhance taste and so on. And then the apex, or the third tier of the Beam food pyramid, are those foods that are created in the factory, new foods created in the factory that have had their original nutrients removed in many cases, and potentially added harmful substances added. So bearing that Beam food ranking system in mind, let's talk about the healthy fats. The healthy fats then would be those that come straight from the land and sea. So healthy fats are the naturally containing fats in your natural foods from nature. So the fats from your nuts, your seeds, your fruits, coconuts. You have your fatty fruits, coconuts, your olives, and so those natural fats in those foods, in your meat, in your eggs, in your dairy, in your fish, those natural fats naturally occurring in those foods are healthy fats. They come from nature. All right. Now, we have fats also that are almost natural. So they're not quite natural. You have to do something to those nature-derived foods to create these transformed fats. So these almost natural fats would be in tier 2 of our Beam food pyramid or Beam food ranking system. So those are the fats that you can press from the fatty fruits, such as avocado, from olives, from coconuts. You can even get oils from nuts as well, from tree nuts, right? And then you can have fat, you can churn cream to get butter, and then you can clarify butter to get ghee. So those are your almost natural fats, and those are also healthy. They are essentially just transformed from the natural sources. And how could I forget also other animal fats such as tallow and lard? These were commonly used back in the day, seem to be becoming more popular now, especially tallow. And these essentially you would render them from the meat. Tallow, of course, from beef, and lard comes from pork. So those are your almost natural fats compared to those that are naturally occurring in the food as you eat them. Now, what are the unhealthy fats? Unhealthy fats are fats or oils in many cases that need to be created in a factory. So this, when you hear people talking about seed oils, It's the corn oil, the canola oil, the soy oil, and these fats need a very complicated industrial process to be produced. They need solvents and so on, hexane to be extracted, and then because the whole chemical mess that is resulted smells so bad, they need deodorizers to remove that harsh chemical smell, and then they need colorizing or bleach to get them to have that beautiful golden color. So a very toxic process that then is counteracted by things to mask the smell and also to make them look more pretty. Those are fats that you would never be able to create in your own kitchen. You can shake up or agitate cream to make your own butter. You could get oil from your coconuts. You could potentially get oil from olives. I'm sure they do that in Italy, but you would never be able to create corn oil or soy oil or canola oil in your kitchen. So that's a good distinction between a natural fat and an unnatural, more unhealthy fat. All right. Now, so you see here that in the most unnatural ones are the ones that potentially have, you know, harm because of the chemical additives, the hexane and the deodorizers and so on. But there's more when it comes to these more processed or ultra processed fats or oils. The thing about these is that they tend to be unsaturated, and these unsaturated or polyunsaturated fats at high heat, they are very easily oxidized, and in the process of that oxidation, there are harmful products and products of oxidation that are produced that can damage the body. They're well known, and there are a lot of different videos you will see that describe how harmful these end products of oxidation are to the body. They promote inflammation, they promote damage to the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and ultimately all this inflammation and damage to your mitochondria can promote or worsen diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So these substances, these industrial seed oils, you can call them, are ultimately not supportive of health, but in fact will take away from health and will harm your health. Now, saturated fat, the animal fats tend to be the saturated fats, and you might wonder, well, what about these saturated fats? Like they're like unhealthy, they're gonna clog my arteries, they're gonna make me fat. But we know now that the saturated fats are not harmful like was once believed, and actually the NIH and those big organizations have pulled back on the advice against consuming those. So we don't worry about those. And like I said, you all might be hearing more about the use of tallow in restaurants now and so on compared to before. So the saturated fats are generally speaking not felt to be harmful at this time. But there's one thing that you should bear in mind when it comes to your saturated fats. So your saturated fats, like I said, will generally come from animal, well, butter, tallow, lard. And the thing about those is that your animal fats would be what your animal eats. So whatever your animal eats, you have to consider, okay, would that be my fat? So the animals might eat genetically modified corn, soy, they give the animals grain. Additionally, some of these animals, they're given antibiotics, they're given hormones. And the thing about fat is that it's a storage for hormones. Hormones tend to get stored in fat. So if you're eating fat from these animals, then it means that potentially you could be taking in toxins, unwanted toxins, which a little bit is not a big deal, but if you're having these things over and over again, it can build up in your own body. All right. So that's one thing to bear in mind when it comes to the animal fats, the fact that you ultimately are what your animal eats. Now, at the end of the day, how should you tackle this? How should you deal with this issue? All right. Obviously, cost becomes a thing, and we know that those industrial ultra processed oils, they tend to be much cheaper than the more natural oils, but you have to weigh the benefits up front of having something that's better for your health versus the downstream potential harmful effects of the cheaper oils. So it's just everybody's decision. At the end of the day, if you make a decision that you're going to try to go towards the more healthy oils, the natural sources of fat, and then the healthier forms, the butter, the olive oil, the coconut oil, and so on, if you make a decision, then gradually, bit by bit, you can incorporate the more healthy fats into your body. All right. I just did this video for you to be informed. I want you to understand the difference, like what is a healthy fat, what is an unhealthy fat, and a good rule of thumb as well in terms of worrying about, okay, is this fat going to oxidize? A general rule of thumb is that if a fat is solid at room temperature then it is more heat stable than one that is liquid at room temperature. So all the industrial seed oils, those are liquid at room temperature. Rule those out. Olive oil is also liquid at room temperature, so it's generally not an oil that would be recommended to be used for frying or high heat cooking. The high heat oils, the more solid ones, of course, we talked about the tallow and so on. Butter, the milk, salts, and butter might burn a bit, but ghee is better because it's clarified butter, and then of course coconut oil as well. So there you have it, the difference between healthy and unhealthy fats. Like I said, I just want you to be informed. I don't want you to be scared. You do your best at the end of the day, but ultimately you want to embrace foods, natural foods that are natural fatty. So your meats, your eggs, your nuts, your seeds. If the fat is naturally existing in those foods, definitely don't worry. If you know it's fat that you could produce in your own kitchen potentially from those natural based foods, again, don't worry. But if it's a fat that can only be produced in the factory by this complicated industrial, very chemical process, you should be concerned. And actually, there might be a ban coming on some of those according to what I'm hearing from the government of the United States. I hope you found this video helpful. If there's any change that you're going to make regarding your consumption of fats in general, definitely share those in the comments below. And I will see you on the next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it when it drops. Bye.